British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved into the intensive care unit. Johnson was admitted on Sunday night for tests after suffering persistent COVID-19 symptoms, including a high temperature for more than a week. His condition worsened yesterday and was subsequently moved into intensive care. Let's talk to our UK correspondent Olly Barratt. So what is the status of his health now, Olly?
The status of Boris Johnson's health is that he remains in intensive care. We understand that on Monday, as his condition was worsening, he had to receive some oxygen supplies to help him breathe. The fact that he's now in intensive care means that he is closer to a ventilator, should it turn out that he needs to be ventilated at some point. We have understood so far from Downing Street that has not been necessary, but that moving him to intensive care does mean that that option is there as a precaution if needed. So certainly a very worrying turn of events for Boris Johnson himself and for the country more widely. No one gets a National Health Service ICU bed in this country unless they very definitely need one. So you can read into all of this the fact that Boris Johnson really isn't well, that his symptoms really have worsened, and that the doctors advised that ICU was the best place for him.
And the chain of command in his absence?
Dominic Raab, the UK Foreign Secretary, has effectively become the de facto Deputy Prime Minister in all of this. That's not a position that officially exists in the UK Constitution, the unwritten UK Constitution, but we had been told in the run-up to this crisis, in the build-up to it, that if Boris Johnson were to be incapacitated for whatever reason, that it would be Dominic Raab who would step into his shoes and fulfil some of his roles in terms of being able to pull some of the levers of the executive levels of government. And Boris Johnson's told Dominic Raab to step into his shoes wherever necessary at the moment. That's the word that we're getting from Downing Street. Dominic Raab himself, the Foreign Secretary, is making it very clear that he is acting on behalf of Boris Johnson at this time. Of course, we don't know how long Boris Johnson may need to be in intensive care. Assuming and hoping that he does come out of intensive care at some point, you would expect that there would need to be some kind of period of recovery after that in which he's not able to fulfil all of his duties as Prime Minister. So Dominic Raab is clearly going to have an important role in all of this. There had been some in Boris Johnson's cabinet, in his government, who had been saying him in the days before he was hospitalised, look, you should take a rest, you should try and recover more fully. That will mean that you get out of this more quickly than otherwise might be the case. Well, as I say, now he's in intensive care. There is clearly going to be a tricky road to recovery.
I mean, what a brutal year for Britain. Brexit, coronavirus, the fact that their Prime Minister is so ill, he's expecting a child as well. I mean, how are people there dealing with all of this news?
I think people were genuinely shocked by the news that Boris Johnson had moved to intensive care. Of course, many people already in this country know people who've been affected by COVID-19 coronavirus. More and more people, unfortunately, know someone who has died from the virus or has been seriously affected by it. So it's not news to people that this is a very serious disease that can really have complications and can take a turn for the worse. But it's really, for many people, I think, brought it home that this can affect anyone at any time, at any stage in life, at any level of fitness, and it can do so very seriously indeed. And Boris Johnson is, of course, the Prime Minister. He is the man that is supposed to be leading the government at this time, leading the country through this crisis. He's the man that's told us we're in lockdown. He's the man that's told us to observe social distancing guidelines. So I think many people are really anxious about the whole situation, and more so now that their Prime Minister is in intensive care. People from all sides of the political spectrum, many of whom are not huge fans of Boris Johnson politically, are deeply worried about his status and desperately hoping, and many of them praying, that he recovers.
This is a time to support him, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Thanks for that.